All right, I'm Jenny Ponzuric, and I am hanging out with you for a couple quick minutes here to talk about explaining results. And this is one of my new favorite words, succinctly, right? We have so much data that we gather together for these different evaluations. And we're always wondering, like, how much do we share verbally at the meetings, right? We have this wonderful comprehensive report. How do we talk about all of these results at the meeting, right? How do we do this in a way? Are we supposed to go page by page? That's not the way that I was trained, all right? And I always think about, like, how much time does everybody have, right? So, one of the tips we're going to talk about today is around integrating your different data sources and focusing on talking about the student over the test or the rating scale, right? So, what does that mean? All right. So, you are writing a super comprehensive report, right? We have gathering information from record reviews to interviews to observations. We typically have someone fill out some rating scales. We administer standardized tests. All of this is great information. But sometimes when we go to our meetings and we're explaining the information, what happens sometimes is we focus a lot on just the test results or the rating scales results. And we actually forget to just integrate in the multiple sources. So there's, of course, so many different ways that we can explain our information at meetings, right? I'm not here to say there's only one way to do this. Of course not. But in my mind, what I like to think about is as I'm writing the report, as I'm documenting all of the record review information and wherever I put my interviews and wherever I'm documenting my observation, all the input from the teacher, right? As I am going through, this is typically what I do through the proofreading process. That's usually when I'm taking some notes for myself about what are some themes that are emerging and where are my data sources aligning so beautifully. That's the thing I want to capture when I'm explaining these results out loud at the meeting, right? I want to talk about what I found in regards to the student's strengths. And instead of just saying, because they got a score of 101 or, a scaled score of 12 over here, or they scored average on the rating scale over here, is to really talk about that in parent-friendly ways and then just throw in a couple of extra words to let the person know that all of your data sources are aligning. So what does that mean? All right. So if we were talking about rating scale information, for example, right, whether we're talking about strengths or we were talking about areas of concern, right, I always like to say something like, thank you everyone for filling out the forms, right? Parents, you filled out a lot of long forms for me. Teachers, if they filled them out. Thank you for filling out the forms for me, right? So I want to talk about what we found through that information, but I'm also going to share how this integrates in with, what I looked at in regards to the other paperwork, what I found in communication with the teacher, as well as when I observed the student. So I like to set the stage as I'm explaining results, already talking about the different data sources that I'm kind of pulling this information from, right? And so then we could launch into what I noticed as some wonderful areas of strengths is that your student is able to make friends really well, gets along with his teachers, he has a really positive attitude here at school. That was something that you guys shared with me through the rating scale information. The student filled out a similar form. We saw that information there. I noticed this when I went into the classroom or I was out on the yard, observing. Just those couple of extra statements to kind of show I'm not just telling you what this one form said, and I'm not needing then to go, let me tell you what this thing said. Let me tell you what this thing said. Let me just tell you what I learned about your student, because my report has all the individual pieces of data, right? For me, when I'm explaining the results, I see my obligation instead of saying, let me talk about this, then let me talk about this, then let me talk about this, and then let me bring it all together. Why don't I just bring it all together for you, right? And then if there's anything specific I need to bring up, if there's anything I want to point out, then I can be like, oh, as noted on page 12 in the report, if we all want to turn to that. Or if a parent or a teacher or someone at the meeting has a specific question and, I filled out something like that. Did I say that was an area of concern? Then we could be like, oh, let's all look. This was the specific area that I looked at, or this is the specific question that you answered in this way, right? So I can go back to the data sources if I want to give a very specific example, or if I need to, for a follow-up, right, be able to respond to something in that kind of way. But for me, when I'm explaining results, I really want to think about, how do I want to bring all of this data together for the people at the table, right? Because otherwise, what happened, I'm just thinking about like early in my career when I was very focused on this source, this source, this source, this source, and then cross my fingers that somewhere along the way I was like, oh, by the way, this is what it all means, right? Now what I just try and say is, I looked at all this data and this is what it all means, right? So that is my tip for today. I know that, we're already here in February. We're seeing what's on our horizon. We're seeing what's coming up. And for some of us, we got a lot of meetings coming up, right? And we have very small amount of time to really make sure we're getting the main points across, right? So my first tip here today is really just be thinking about pulling all those data sources together for the person you are talking about, and really talk about what you learned about the student and not just about the test, right? Okay, so I want to share with you that I'm going to be doing a 2-hour training all about this topic in just a couple of weeks. So in a couple of weeks, on Monday, February 26th, I am going to do a 2-hour training all about explaining results succinctly. We've already talked about writing parent-friendly reports in this training series, so we're really just focusing in on the verbal explanation piece. And for those of you who've hung out with me before, maybe you've been to some of my trainings before, you hung out in summer boot camp or something like that, you might have heard some of these conversations before. This is not the first time I've ever, been able to provide this kind of content. But one of the things that I've really got some feedback from people when I've done these trainings is they love some examples, right? It's one thing to just be like, hey guys, integrate your sources of data. Well, what does it actually sound like? So what I'm going to be doing during this training is I'm going to pre-record, and then I'll just share the different video snippets during the training of me actually presenting the information. Now, of course, I'm not recording myself in the middle of a meeting or anything like that, but how would I do this? And I share with you that they're going to be pre-recorded because of this. I have a hard time in the middle of a training to just swap over my brain into like, let's pretend like we're presenting IEP information. So that's why I'm spending time really thinking through and planning out. So we're going to have some examples, whether we're talking about academic results, cognitive processing results. I hope to have some examples for social emotional information as well. Anytime I'm thinking of, we've got a lot of pieces of data, we've got a lot of sources of data, we might have multiple tests, multiple rating scales. How do we put that all together? So if you're someone who really learns well from hearing very specific examples, that's what we're going to be doing. All right. So Monday, February 26th. And yes, to answer your question already, we are recording it. So if you are not able to join us live because you've got 9 million things already to do on February 26th, that's absolutely fine. We're going to record it. And if you are able to make it live, it's going to be from noon to 2 o'clock Pacific Standard Time, with 30 minutes at the end for some question and answer time. Even if you are able to make it live, you will still have access to the recording. I don't know about you, but sometimes I hear things live in trainings and like a month later, I'm like, gosh, I wish I could hear that all over again. So we are recording it and you will have access to those replays. So it kind of fits whatever your learning need is. If you are interested and you have not yet signed up for this particular training Or guess what? You can sign up for our whole training series. We have this one and one more live coming up in March. We've already done 3 sessions in our training series, but guess what? If you want to get the whole bundle and listen to those 3 replays, you can do that as well. We have lots of options for you. Just head over to my website, jennyponzuric.com. Right there on the front of the screen has information for you to click on, find out all the information about pricing. And then of course, if you have any questions about any of these pieces, feel free. On so many different parts of the website is a place to just follow up and ask a question. And so either myself or someone from my team is very happy to go ahead and respond to any questions that you have. So I hope this tip was helpful. And I hope if you are someone who needs a little bit more in this topic, that you join me in a couple weeks as we are going to dig deep into this topic. All right. Thank you everyone for listening, and I'll see you all next time. Bye everyone.